Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point Stories and Strategies from the World of Business. I'm your host, Blaine Birch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun. And joining me today, I'm really happy to have Ricardo Casanova, Vice President from Visitor Bay. And that's actually a new role that I'm hearing about because Ricardo and I have known each other for quite a long time. And we were just, before we popped on the show here, we were talking about our lack of patio beer this year. So hopefully that will come in the next couple of months here and we can do a real catch up. Thanks for joining me today, Ricardo.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So yeah, I just before we kind of hop into what you're doing today with Visitor Bay, of course, we've known each other for I don't know how many years, at least over a decade now. And I wanted to get just sort of jump back into your past and ask you how you got started down the path to entrepreneurship.
Good question. So it started very much when I was young. I figured I was pretty handy with computers. And so all my parents' friends and people at church and that sort of thing would get me to fix their computers and they would give me cash. So I thought that was pretty sweet. And then I ended up working for a few telcos. I kind of worked my way up into at a couple of telecom, like TELUS, Rogers, that sort of thing. And Rogers hired me at one point and then laid me off like 7 months later. So I like declined another kind of high-end role to go to Rogers, and then they collapsed my position 7 months later. So
nice.
They actually came back to me. My boss came back to me and said, "Hey, we still need you. Like you still have all these projects on the go. So we'll just hire you as a consultant. So start a company and then here you go. You start Monday," sort of a thing, which was kind of cool. I'm like, oh, okay. So I threw together a company and then so that's kind of how it started. And then after I got a taste of that, I'm like, I never want to work for a corporate big monster again. I like this whole being your own boss thing. Yeah. And so that really motivated me to figure out the best way to do that. So that's kind of how I got my start many moons ago.
Yeah, interesting. Sort of, I've heard that from a lot of entrepreneurs in the show, that it's opportunity. Entrepreneurs kind of recognize that opportunity and sort of jump on it. And it's interesting because not everyone would do that. Of course, like some people go, "Yeah, no, I'm just going to go get a job." But yeah. It's that fortunate thing that I think, I think myself included, some people know they want to be an entrepreneur right from birth, right? Mm-hmm. And some of us, I think, it was subconscious, but it was there. And this first opportunity I had, I just grabbed it, right? And just sort of took off running from there, almost on autopilot. And it feels a bit the same there. So what was the what were you doing? Like what? So you got kind of this role with Rogers as a like a contractor or a business that you had started. What was the opportunity there? What were you doing?
So I got into the telecom game right when between you had like cell phones and moving towards data devices. So really the BlackBerries at the time. Okay. And it was obviously higher monthly service fees to go with BlackBerry. And so it was a big push to, okay, how do we get wider adoption? How do we move people from voice only to voice and data devices? And so I went out and I got I think I was one of the first guys in Western Canada to get certified by BlackBerry. So I worked really hard to make myself like the guy. So to the point where some oil companies would fly me up on their private jet because their CEO's BlackBerry wasn't syncing. And then as soon as I was done, they'd fly me back again. Like, so it was pretty sweet. Like everybody that was getting BlackBerry at the time were like government ministers, CEOs, so I spent a lot of time in the ledge, just sitting with random people, the CEO of AHS, just kind of sitting there and, it's so slow. You're trying to sync this BlackBerry and it's going to take 4 hours. So you're just like sitting in their office, like, so how's healthcare this year? Like just trying to make small talk. So it was pretty interesting. That's kind of how I got into that role. And then it was just, how do we use, ultimately data devices became tools in the field, and a lot of companies were dealing with mobility and data devices as toys. oh, well, this guy shouldn't get one because it's too fancy, it's too expensive. It's like, yeah, but will it help him do his job? Well, yeah, of course he'll do his job faster and better. Okay, well, it's a tool then, it's not a toy. And so it's just trying to educate people in corporations about how they can leverage mobility better. That was my main role with Rogers. And then when I was laid off, we still had projects with Edmonton Police where we were training all of their, what were the deputy chiefs, I think. It was a certain level that we're all getting new Blackberries. And then so I had to go in and train all of them on how to use it properly. Mm-hmm. And what else was there? Oh, the National Energy Board, I think, needed training as well. So it was just all these just kind of random projects that I was in charge of that I just turned around and build Rogers for.
It's funny hearing about like, flying up to sync oil execs.
Yeah.
But it's for people that like we're in Alberta here, which is oil country, which is rapidly changing. I think that's going to be very different very soon. But for a lot of years, and especially the kind of last 20, and there, during a couple of the booms, it was hard to describe to people how wacky or how bonkers it was here. And I know a friend of mine flew a private jet and flew a charter for a while before he went to one of the big airlines. And like I know he'd be able to get a beer on Friday night and all of a sudden his beeper go off and he'd be like, yeah, I'm going to fly up to Fort Mac on, to take a part.
Yeah.
Probably a $6 part. But they would be losing like whatever it was, like $500,000 an hour, whatever they were losing.
Yep.
And they would do like whatever he had to get. And it was a really kind of a strange time that's rapidly, disappearing, of course, from Alberta. But it's interesting sort of hearing about that kind of experience. And then back in the, I remember having my first BlackBerry, I think before I had a Palm. Was it a Palm Pilot? A Trio? I think it was
a Palm Trio. Yeah.
A Palm Trio. And it's amazing how that, like you said, it goes from a toy to a tool. And I still remember the shift when I went to BlackBerry. I had forgot about this, but I was headed to Texas, I think on a trip at a conference and all of that kind of stuff. I think it was South by Southwest actually. And, one of the keys broke on my Trio. I can't remember which one, but I know it was an important one. Like you couldn't put in phone numbers or something, right?
Yeah.
And then you realize like I can't leave because most of my day you're meeting people all day, and you have to be sending them stuff and keeping up with them. And so I remember walking into just one of the shops and saying, well, I think I need a loaner. Well, no, we can't do that. So I canceled the plan, went somewhere else and got a BlackBerry on a new plan and it was up and running like basically before I got on the plane. And it was bizarre, but it was within a couple of years, I'm sure it went from, kind of a nice to have, or here's a mobile phone that, the big belt clip or whatever, to, I need this as a fundamental part of my business. Right. And it's even today, like I live on my phone and my laptop. Like it's just how the world goes, right? So
wasn't that short a time ago that people were still using flip phones and voice only, right? And you just can't get by in today's world without having a multifunctional tool like an iPhone or Android, or not so much BlackBerry these days, but
and 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 they're expensive to a degree, but for what they do, really inexpensive for what they deliver to someone, being on the move and be able to do almost whatever you need to do. And how have you seen, because it sounds like you've actually came in right at the start as this was coming to today, where now, especially during COVID, everybody's remote. How has that sort of changed the environment?
I think it hasn't changed it too much. I think people are, people were already heavily dependent on their mobile devices in their personal life. And I think that's really where there was another transition at one point where we called it the consumerization of the IT department. So it was right around when the iPhone came out. We were very close with BlackBerry at the time and talking to their executives, and their executives are like, security on the iPhone is garbage. We're rock solid. We're Fort Knox. Like no one can mess with the BlackBerry infrastructure from a security standpoint. So CIOs and CEOs are not going to even consider looking at the iPhone. So they were quite confident. But what happened was, these CEOs and CIOs, daughters and wives and sons all came home with their new fancy iPhone, and they can stick it on a dock and it can do this and it can do that. And all of a sudden the CEO goes to his IT group and says, I want one of those. And they go, but sir, the security. And he goes, yeah, did I stutter? I want one of those. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
All of a sudden security wasn't an issue when it still should have been. So it very much became where the consumer and the corporate side kind of blurred, and iPhone became the de facto standard just because, they wanted the cool, nice and fancy toys, really. So yeah, it changed. I think it changed then. Now, so I think it just made it more apparent that these are tools and they're absolutely necessary, regardless of your position, whether you're a field worker or if you're an office worker, you're now remote as well, right? So I think it just kind of put the exclamation point on it being necessary to have these devices.
How is the like security? Of course, because it becomes a bigger and bigger issue kind of moving forward too. What is that environment like today? And not just phones, because now everything's sort of plugged in, right?
Yeah. I think security has always been kind of an issue, especially when it comes to, near field communication, these types of technologies that I don't think have really had an opportunity to mature. But if it were a very mature type marketplace for NFC and those sorts of things, that's where you see those ads where somebody will walk by and they'll scan something across your back pocket where your wallet is.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And steal your information, or it'll scan something off of your phone. So I mean, there's always these inherent risks of potential security problems, but it's no more than it has been in the past. I think the thing that we had always been working towards in mobility was, okay, now that everybody has a smartphone, now what else? What else is out there? And it started off as M2M. I don't know if you remember that, machine to machine. And
vaguely, yeah.
Like SCADA type applications, like it's like one machine just sending data to another machine. So no human interaction. So, and it's kind of gone through a couple of iterations, but ultimately now it's called IoT, right? Internet of Things. So, anything can have a SIM card, anything can have an antenna on it, sometime, regardless of size. And it's just a matter of just data collection. So it comes back into that conversation about big data and that sort of thing. And that's when Wade and I started Mobile Mondays. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. I remember the name. I don't remember much about it, but I do remember. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of, that's when Mobile Monday started to kick up, is like, okay, how else can companies leverage this type of thing? And I think it was around the time when, Candy Crush came out on iPhone or something like that. Like there was people making like, tens of millions of dollars off of apps. And then so everybody wanted an app, and everybody, we'd have corporations come to us, go, we need an app. It's like, okay, for what? I don't know. It's just, I'm hearing we need an app. Like, so everyone was kind of in this craze. So we started Mobile Monday to kind of help with that education piece and try to connect people at, the startup Edmonton type spaces, connect them to corporations that are looking for kind of that mobile expertise, right? So connecting those two worlds. So that was the intent on Mobile Monday, but that's, like, can we control, we see it in our home automation stuff that's almost widespread these days of, can I control my garage door? Can I control my lights, my thermostat, that sort of thing. So,
I was reading I'm sure it was just a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember the details at all, outside of that a place I remember got hacked through their thermometer. you probably maybe have read about that, but it was, they had they got hacked through the thermometer because it was connected to the Wi-Fi network. And of course it was just like, no security on that. And it just, they walked in the back door.
You have, if you think about it, when you have all of these endpoints connected to your Wi-Fi, their internet, they're basically ports, right? And if somebody can come and scan your entire network, they're likely to find a port somewhere that they can kind of finagle their way in, right? So I don't think we've seen the tip of the iceberg when it comes to consumers getting hacked, for sure.
I don't think so. And I know I'm always conscious of anything that's sort of plugged into our network and what I buy. So at some point we've got a lot of like, high tech, you kind of like that stuff, but it's actually quite limited. And I pay extra to go for the big brand that I'm familiar with, and because you feel a little more confident in that. But it's I think there's a lot that's going to come down the road when people are getting hacked from their fridge or whatever it is.
Yeah, right.
So interesting new world, but we just finally got a Apple, what the heck do you call the thing? It's a little speaker that you can talk to, and it'll give you answers and all that. And it has creeped us out a couple times when it's talked with us without intending to talk with it. My car's done that too a few times. Driving down the road and I say something, also my car's asking me something.
Yeah.
What the hell? Right? It's a interesting new world, but it reminds you that there's some way into all those things too, right?
Well, that's funny. You always hear these conspiracy theorist guys are like, oh yeah, they just want to track you. And like the COVID vaccine, it's a microchip for Justin Trudeau. And like, dude, do you have a phone? Like, you're tracked.
Yeah. They're they're typing that in on their phone.
You're tracked. Yeah. Don't kid yourself.
Yeah. And then the other thing too is, not only is not that interesting, is this is a big, thick, heavy device, and the battery runs out after how many hours? And they think, you're going to inject something microscopic. I'm like, man, I wish I had that battery.
Right? Yeah.
That's not how it works. But it's bizarre what it's just things have gotten so much more polarized, and people find their information from too often kind of stupid sources, I suppose. But that's how it's gone. But so how's the sort of, I guess, sales process and service process shifted for you now that in the last year, kind of being suddenly remote?
Yeah. So my life in telecom is kind of is still there, but we are more. So I created a different company and really got out of that telecom space. Okay. Ultimately what the previous organization was telecom expense management, being able to download the raw billing data from the carriers, TELUS, Rogers, Bell, even Verizon and AT&T in the States as well, and being able to chop that information up, make sense of it, run reports on it, find optimizations, anomalies, that sort of thing. So when we first started, it would have been probably 40%. Companies were paying 40% too much on their cell phone bills. Wow. Because they could just get away with it, right? And so we came in and we kind of narrowed that gap, and we knew the carriers eventually would not like that, us affecting their revenue model. So now they are offering what we do for free. Imagine that. They're offering to actually bill people correctly, and they'll do it for free, like it's some sort of a favor to the customer. So they're trying to nudge us out of the market by doing what we do, but do it for free. So we knew that there was a bit of a limited shelf life on that. And I got my fill of telecom. I was kind of, I've done this for 15 years. I'm good. I need a new adventure. I need something new in the technology space to kind of keep my brain young, right? So so we started a company called Visitor Bay, And that is technology based, but it was more on replacing that paper book at reception.
Okay.
That's really in its very basic form, is that's what we were doing, right? The paper forms had, people would just scribble. Like, you've been to enough offices, by the time you're at your fifth office of the day, you're like Blaine blah, and then a scribble of numbers, right? So it's not really usable data. So I went into it with a friend, and so we started Visitor Bay, and that's been interesting. So in the last year, basically we had launched it. Right when COVID started, basically. Like, I think we started to sell in October, and COVID hit in, whatever, January or February.
Yeah. Okay. So it wasn't, I thought it was maybe when I saw it, I thought maybe a reaction to COVID. You were actually ahead of the sort of game there, actually.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We were just able to pivot. So my business partner with Visitor Bay is a gentleman by the name of Brett Carrier. Very, very smart guy, very intense. And so when we really saw what was happening with COVID, we decided to pivot, and we were able to pivot very quickly. And so, so we start to focus on the COVID piece and having a checklist, and, they could sign their name saying, yes, I don't have, whatever. And then have that all dashboarded up. So we were ahead of the curve, not by design, but we were just fortunate enough to be able to be agile.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So what was the, like, I guess the big aha moment where you thought, this is an opportunity, this is an issue that we see needs to be fixed?
I think it was, and we were talking about this earlier, like, everything's about timing, and everything's about the right opportunity and being able to identify what that opportunity is. It started in just in conversations with people that we were talking with before COVID hit. They were like, yeah, this looks good, this is great. But because of COVID, we don't have anybody in the office. So, but when we do, we're going to need to have checklists. We're going to have to be able to track these people, contact tracing, that sort of thing. So this would be really cool. So it was really ideas from our potential customers that said, hey, this is great, but what we'll need is something a little more, I guess, mature when it came to the COVID piece. And so, yeah, we just had a quick chat, like, okay, I think this is going to be the world we're living in. So it's probably the right time to, make some moves and pivot a little bit. So.
And I imagine there's got to be a security aspect, and there's like other levels of information there that's so critical to have a system like that, I suppose. Hey.
Yeah, we're finding, it's funny. I've read that entrepreneurs, when they start a company, what they were working on quickly becomes not the focus of their business. The end product or the end solution that they actually end up with was not the idea that they started with, right? And I think that was very much with us, in that we weren't aware of the potential applications of it. And it was all customer driven when they said, oh, okay, hey, for example, we're in a lot of loading docks, because they have contractors that come in that have to sign in. They have to, identify what parking spot they're in the loading dock, or license plate number, or if they're borrowing a dolly, that sort of data capture, or key cards, for example, is a big one as well. So if they need actual physical key or one of those key fobs, they, a lot of the times, a guy will sign out a key card, hop in his truck, drive to Fort McMurray, and he gets a phone call halfway there, and somebody at a loading dock's like, hey, do you have that key card? He's like, yeah, I'm in Fort McMurray, or I'm by Firebag or something like that, right? So they just had all of these moving parts, and it was all, tracked by paper, and it wasn't really usable for people. So things like that kind of came out of the woodwork, I think was pretty interesting, that we figured we'd be in more front offices than anything else, but we're in loading docks, we're in beauty salons, we're construction offices, kind of just this wide range of people just wanting to keep track of what's going on from a contact tracing, but also security perspective of who's in the office. I actually have a funny story. We have one customer that it's on an iPad. So it's an iPad and it has a security cable and a nice secure case. And one of our customers had a contractor come in, sign in, take a picture of his face, because that was one of the features, take a picture of his face. He went and he did his work. On his way out, he tried to steal the iPad. And so he's like yanking on this thing and making a bunch of noise. And so one of the guys comes out and is like, "What are you doing?" And the guy booked it. And so they just went into the dashboard and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's the guy I saw yanking on." So they called his company and they fired the guy. But like, he's just not, is not the smartest criminal. But yeah, there's little funny stories like that came out of it that I didn't really anticipate, which is kind of neat.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting, like, especially like, obviously now with COVID. And I think even as we come out of COVID, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a long haul. And I think there'll be a lot of permanent changes to how people, move in and out, and then there's the security level and tracking all these things. And there's a lot there. And it's not, like my team's all remote, and I haven't had an office in quite a number of years now that was like in a building like that. But you can see how it's changed so much. And even the last couple of years, I've been to a lot more offices where you have some sort of booking, system, and you get little necklaces and all that kind of stuff. It's you can see where the world's going, and they have to keep track of everybody and everything in such a different way than they used to. So it feels like you're right on the cusp of a pretty massive change for physical space, I suppose.
Yeah, that's what we're kind of hoping that we're on the cusp. I think you're right. I think a lot of people are saying that they like working from remote. People that have never had the opportunity. But I think that's, having been a remote worker for the last 20 years, I think it'll change. Like, I think there's going to be a hybrid model.
Yeah.
If you look at Google and IBM, I think they went to, and TELUS did this at one point too. They did kind of audits on their real estate as to, okay, I think the metrics were like, are there signs of life at this desk? Like, is there a purse? Is there a hot coffee? If there's no person. Okay, so that's one, there's somebody around, right? And then the next one's empty. Next one is ass and seat, and they're kind of really taking stock of who's actually utilizing office space. And they found that it wasn't utilized anywhere near it needed to be to justify the cost of it. So TELUS started to hot desk people, right? Where you work remote, and then when you wanted to come into the office, you had to reserve a desk, sort of a thing. So you never had a permanent spot. So, guys like IBM and Google and TELUS did these sorts of things. And I believe IBM reverted back, and this was before COVID. They reverted back to actually having people in the office because they found collaboration kind of fell off, right? And productivity. So I find it kind of funny that you see these reports coming out like, oh, workers say that they've, their productivity is 120% of normal, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, where'd you get that information? Did they tell you that? Yeah, self-reporting. Exactly. Like, okay, like if I'm sitting around in my pajamas, drinking wine at noon every day, I'd probably buff those numbers too and be like, oh yeah, no, I got way more work done. Like, so I don't buy that there's a lot more productivity. When I collaborate, like we're social animals, right? So collaboration, I think, is really ingrained into us. So, yeah, if I'm walking around the office and I see him, oh, Blaine, yes, just your face reminds me we need to talk about this, right? But if we don't have the opportunity to have those cross pollinations, they just don't happen, right? So, yeah. I think innovation and ingenuity, I think, is a loss when it comes to people potentially working remote full time.
Yeah, it's like us having a remote team. You have to put in a lot of systems and processes in place, and have a lot of conversations and a lot of communication that you wouldn't have in an office, to keep as much of that going as you can, and to adapt for it.
Yeah.
But I think you're right that I think what's going to come out on the other side is going to be some sort of hybrid model where, but I think what'll happen is a service like yours will be more essential, because there's going to be a lot more coming and going. It's not everybody shows up at 9 and everybody leaves at 5. It's just in and out on some days and not other days, and who's where and what are they doing. And I can see just a lot more sort of odd traffic going in and out of almost everywhere, which means there's a lot of gaps there as well that need to be filled. So
yeah, no, absolutely. It's the vision, I'm pretty good at vision, and then Brett's usually the sensible one that says, okay, let's come back to earth a little bit. But yeah, I think the broader vision for Visitor Bay is ultimately interactions, right? Whether as a human with my smartphone and I want to interact with this building or this office space, or if I want to interact with this asset, right? How can we tie all those pieces together, right? And then so as you get a little less generic and get a little more specific, so I mean, an interaction between me walking into an office, me walking into a loading dock, or me driving a company vehicle, or me walking into an oil site and having to do a safety form, or things like that. Anytime that humans need to interact with either an asset, whether it's a building, a car, a field asset, what are the requirements from a safety perspective? And so that's kind of where we're going with Visitor Bays. That we even considered rebranding, just because we call it Visitor Bay. We talk to people and they go, well, we're not having visitors right now. It's like, well, it does more than just like people get hung up on visitor. We've clearly grown beyond it just being visitor, and I think that was maybe a little short-sighted on our side to just assume that visitor would be the only kind of application for it. But yeah, it's grown beyond that to a much bigger, different way of life. And I think we're still trying to figure out where we fit into that. And I think that's been kind of the hardest part of our sales cycle is, you talk to people and they go, we don't know, well, what don't you know? We don't know anything. We don't know if we're going back to work, when we're going back to work, what restrictions we have. There's a lot of uncertainty out there with everybody, that nobody's willing to kind of pull the trigger on something, because we don't know what the new world really is going to look like, 6 months from now. So that's probably been our biggest challenge, is everyone's saying, cool, like that's awesome, but we don't know where we're going to be in a month, never mind 6, right?
The interesting thing is that when they do know, it's going to be like, it's like now they're closing down, they're shutting a bunch in Ontario and Alberta now. And I think that's one of the dangers that the businesses face, is it'll turn on. It's going to at some point, and it's going to be on, off, this, left, right. And your system can actually help them be better prepared for all the different people. It's staff, it's visitors, it's contractors. It's how do you take control of that, and how do you roll with the different needs from day to day and week to week that are going to change, inevitably, for sure. Right. So.
Yeah. And if you look at, so there's a restaurant in Calgary, I won't mention their name, but there's a restaurant in Calgary that had a massive outbreak. And a couple of their restaurants around Alberta, I think, have had a couple of smaller outbreaks, but there was a big one in Calgary. And now and there was a note in there that said, AHS wasn't able to get a contact tracing log from them, or it wasn't available at the time, or something like that. And then it said lower in the article that there was a law firm in Calgary looking potentially to do a class action lawsuit against the restaurant, because and we have this conversation with a lot of people is, are you doing your due diligence? Like,
yeah,
can we, temperature check everybody? Can we have, spraying machines? Can we, yeah, sure. We could have all of this stuff, but at the end of the day, if you're not doing the bare minimum of trying to do what's required, which is contact tracing and having, legible information, proper information, then you're opening yourself up to liability, right?
yeah.
So, we really talk to companies about risk mitigation and restaurants. Like when, if you are going to open and you need to contact trace properly, is really a pen and paper or a little slips of paper. Like, it's almost that speed to get that information to AHS2 is important, right? And if you have to filter through, a bag full of pieces of paper or, a sheet that you've written on or scribbled on,
yeah,
how quick are you going to be able to get that contact tracing information out? And it's realistically, it's not possible, right? So,
well, and I wonder on the other side, what sort of privacy issues that could be when it's like, if it's in a system and it's like people can't access it. It's a lot different to scraps of paper laying around with, who was here at noon on whatever. Yeah, it's probably better to have in a system where it's secure, right? And and as far as like, you go into a restaurant, like generally, like my phone knows where I'm at, credit card knows where I'm at. If I had to, like every time I go to Rosso, probably with you, have to put in my driver or my license plate so they don't give me a ticket. Like all of this information is already there. And then, but some of the most important, like contract tracing, and it's on a scrap of paper or in a notebook that someone could walk off with, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? So, there's an interesting. It's changing so fast, but it's interesting to be right at the forefront and always looking at what are the problems they face, and how do we mitigate. Is a really cool opportunity, because it feels like there's a point where every store, restaurant, office, everything at some point is going to have something in there to some degree, right? Whether it's just for staff or whether it's for clients, customer, everything else. So, really interesting area. But I do now see what you're saying with like the visitor thing. It's like, it could be just a wider range. Some, it could be all staff, and the next one, it could be all clients, and you just don't know, right?
Yeah, that's it exactly. It's, and it is a cool opportunity, but it's almost like, not sure, like I'm just cautiously optimistic, I think is the term. Just kind of seeing what's happening and almost feeling like we're behind the 8 ball a little bit, or we could be hitting the tipping point, or we could be falling off the other end, sort of a thing, right? So
well, and I think like the thing that we were always fighting for, and I think we found now, is where that sort of go to market opportunity is, and narrow, like where is that one opportunity where we can get traction, and you have like a whole bunch of, maybe it's restaurants, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but it's like getting that spearhead in, and then and then expanding. It's tricky to find that part, but once you find it, you can just go. And that's a challenge, but also a massive opportunity, right?
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the cooler things that we're looking to partner with another company in going on movie sets, because they have they have a unique requirement for anybody that comes on set. Not only has to do like the COVID stuff, but there's other hazards. If it's a water set, is there Red Cross, or are there the safety personnel required, or is there animals involved, and then is there a handler, what are the mitigation, like, so there's all this unique things that they're looking at now, digitizing some of this, because it's becoming too much to handle and manage, sort of a thing. So it's kind of weird markets, and it's never a dull moment, I guess, which is nice.
Well, and it's the need, and it's the, like, everything has to be like, they have to have records of everything now, and it shouldn't be paper, it should be up in the cloud, it should, so It's interesting. I, like I said, when I saw the visitor bay, I'm like, oh, what's that? So I poke around, look at it, and
Yeah.
it sounds like just a really interesting and kind of unique opportunity. So,
Yeah.
what are your like you said, it's a bit of a tough, a tricky time to sell, but there's all sorts of opportunities like that. How are like what is your next step to sort of get that next bit of traction, I suppose?
So we've got a couple of things on the go. One being, because we are in Alberta, oil and gas is not what it used to be, but it's still a strong engine of this province. It's still a strong engine of this country. Oil and gas isn't going anywhere. And we're industrial. Alberta is a very industrial place to be. And so we're working on some solutions that would be specific to the industrial portion.
Mm-hmm.
With margins being tight and all of these crazy things that are going on in the world, and the cost of the barrel of oil and its price. We also want to provide companies in the industrial space ways to reduce their costs and their time in the field and those sorts of things. So I guess our industrial focus is going to be next. We're really going to start to, it's been a little bit difficult in that, one of the first questions people ask usually is, what's your target market? And with this, it's like, well, I don't know, anybody that has a front door and a back door, so it's been really difficult to kind of focus on, okay, who are we targeting, what industry vertical, and that sort of thing. It's been a challenge. It still remains a challenge. But so we decided to just focus on some verticals and see if we can have a little bit of success having some focus and be a little more, keen on terminology and speaking their language and really understanding their challenges and what keeps them up at night, as opposed to, spaghetti against the wall and hoping something sticks. We want to be very deliberate in how we're engaging with prospects. So I think that's our big thing is going after the industrial and then really looking at other verticals that we can focus it on.
Yeah. No, it sounds like a kind of in a way a similar path that we took, just, exploring and once we found our lane, then it was such a shift for us to be able to suddenly go, okay, go there, like 100% focused, just go there. And it was a really nice shift for us to be able to do that, but it's not easy because there's opportunity everywhere. That's not easy in a way to pick it out of the crowd and find it, right? But it's
I yearn for that clarity, I would love to just have like, yes, this is what we're doing, this is a plan. And right now it's almost like we'll kind of see where we go. So
well, and you have to like, and so you're at that spot where it's you get to explore all those different things and explore those opportunities until you can go, that's it, that's the one. And hopefully, it might come tomorrow, it might come next year, but but hopefully it's there, right, for the taking, because the opportunity in that space is huge. So
absolutely.
Well, this was really a terrific conversation. I learned a lot from and just really interested in what you guys are doing and the opportunity and just kind of looking at how the world's changing and you're kind of at the pointy end of the spear there, which is really cool. But if anyone would like to track you down, how should they find you?
Best way is probably LinkedIn. I'm all over social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, or just, email me, text me. Those are the best ways to get a hold of me. I tend to get scattered with all the different, notifications going everywhere and stuff, but any one of those things I'm pretty keen on. So
yeah. And it's, so if anyone out there is interested in getting hold of Ricardo, definitely reach out. This sounds like, there could be some really interesting uses for your technology. And I think you're doing some really cool stuff there. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, I'm Blaine Birch, co-founder, CEO at Dryrun. If you're looking for some help modeling your finances, managing your cash flow, please come find us at dryrun.com. And of course, for accounting professionals that are in the advisory space or looking to offer advisory to their clients, that's our big superpower. Please come visit us. We've got a terrific partner program for you guys. Thanks so much for joining us. And thanks, Ricardo. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thanks, Blaine. We'll see you soon.